I used to dream militant dreams of taking over America to show these white folks how it should be done. I used to dream radical dreams of blowing everyone away with my perceptive powers of correct analysis. I even used to think I'd be the one to stop the riot and negotiate the peace. Then I awoke and dug that if I dreamed natural dreams of being a natural woman, doing what a woman does when she is natural, I would have a revolution.
Now, let me just say, for me, I don't use that dichotomy. So for me, first of all, there was no Black Power movement. There was always a strain of Black nationalism in SNCC, certainly, and I think probably in CORE as well. And possibly, there was always a sense of for the race, as we used to say, even in Dr. King's organization, and certainly in the NAA as well. And so when I come into SNCC, the assumption is that we are building what becomes known as Black Power in all that we're doing.
Well, first of all, I would not initially categorize SNCC as a Black Power movement. I think that toward the end of SNCC, we had evolved to that point. But SNCC began as a nonviolent movement to break down the Jim Crow laws under which we lived. Now, this is not to say that there wasn't always sexism and misogyny, but in terms of what we were trying to do in the movement, it was a movement for all Black people to get the right to vote, the right to sit down and have a cup of coffee if we wanted to, the right to go into a movie in the front door, the right to go to a library and check out a book, those kinds of things. Now, I think if you're looking at the end of SNCC, and as many, well, certainly Stokely Carmichael and Reb Brown became involved with the Black Panther Party, and I think there was certainly a very masculinist tone and vibration, even though when you look at the footage, you see that there were lots of sisters marching and also carrying weapons. But there clearly was in the Black Power movement this thing about Black males taking back their rights as males that had been stripped from them, during slavery and Jim Crow.
When a public official orders a group of men to get back to work and then we'll talk, and treats them as though they are not men, that's a racist point of view. And no matter how you dress it up in terms of whether or not a union can organize, it's still racism. For at the heart of racism is the idea that a man is not a man.
And you're going to have 5 minutes for this test. Everybody's ready? You have your pencils? Okay, start.
Over the last 2 years, we've helped some 1,600 young guys gain entrance into apprenticeship. But there are hundreds of thousands of other youngsters who, because either limitation of our program, limitation of the job opportunities, we weren't able to touch. And that what has to be done is the opportunity has to be expanded, and we have to be able to reach all those youngsters.
Omit the whole middle section.
This is what civil rights broadly is about now, is to create opportunities, to create mobility, to be able to get Black people out of the shackles of poverty. Construction does great things for the male ego. You're in an all-man's field. It's a virile kind of job. It exudes strength. Most of these young guys, like that kind of image. In most American cities, construction is such a visible industry, it does something again for your psyche to be able to go out and point out that you just put up the Empire State Building.
I think the Moynihan Report and the Black nationalists came together, in a sense, when they began talking about masculinity, we began to have these nationalist forces saying women should step back. And then to cap it all, the Moynihan Report came out, the 1965 Moynihan Report, which was a study by a sociologist. I think it had been, the government had asked him, probably Kennedy, to do this. And he came around racism and around what they call the Negro family. So Moynihan comes out with this report, which essentially says the problem with the black family is that it has so many female-headed households. That makes it a matriarchy, and this is a problem, and it distorts what should be, which is a patriarchal structure, and therefore this is the cause of racism. This is the cause of the oppression of the Negro family. This is the cause. This is why the Negro family suffers and is poor and is poor. In other words, at an immediate level, that was our response. How dare they? They're blaming black women essentially for the conditions of racism in the society. We were outraged. So between those three things kind of coming together, that was the impetus for us to propose organizing a black women's caucus of some kind within SNCC to begin addressing very explicitly conditions of women, programs for women, which would include both the role of women within SNCC and the role of black women in society as a whole.
And there was also one of the other statistics which was floating around during the day was that black women were taking jobs from black men. So, there you go. Now we're too much. We're guilty. And as it turned out, that really wasn't true. On that scale, the ones who made the most money, certainly white men, but under them was black men, then white women, and then the black women was last.
In order to be fair, let's first find out who we have here, and I'd love to hear your responses. Dr. Marie Saunders is a psychoanalyst in private practice in New York, and she's also an assistant professor with City University. Mm-hmm. And in the middle, the man, and I can't wait to find out whether or not all those things are true, Dr. Alvin Poussant. He is a psychiatrist and based at Harvard Medical School, and you're also Dean of Students.
Mm-hmm. There have been a lot of problems between black men and black women. And it's kind of a feeling that black men don't hold up or stand up to being men and so on. Well, I think, it's hard to generalize. I think that some do, some don't. But I think that black men try to cope and survive because they've been pushed around and oppressed in a different way than black women have been. See, the experiences have been a little bit different.
Now, don't a lot of men, because of all of these explanations that the doctors give, rationalize just inconsideration?
Well,
in other words, everybody's looking for a punching bag, and if you're told, punch away, because we know society is very hard on you.
Right, okay. Yeah, someone can, they can do that. Yeah, sure they use it that way, and sometimes they can manipulate women, or, by using, arguments about their manhood, or they accuse the black woman of being castrating, quote, that the black woman is somehow...
Are we castrating and matriarchal?
I don't think so. What do you think?
Either. Not really.
But these
myths...
It
depends what you're sensitive to.
I think it has something to do with the fact that women are looking to lean upon their men, and there are, of course, instances where he does not wish to be leaned upon, and she finds out she has to pick up the reins in the absence of no one picking them up. She therefore becomes, at least to him, some type of matriarch. In other words, sometimes he manipulates a woman into the position where she has to be bitchy, if you want to use that term, and he then can reinforce his own theory that she's that way anyway. But he does something, the source is that he commits something or he does something that puts her in that position. This is not always true, but it is true in a lot of instances.
There wasn't even stated very many men who embraced what we now would call feminism. I mean, we women had to fight for our place And we almost didn't do it based on, I guess you would say, feminist principles, but based on, hey, we do the work. We go to jail. We get beaten. We're doing the same thing you do. So we have as much right to determine the direction of this movement as you do. So it was coming from that place, which is, of course, a feminist position. But I don't think any of us knew it at the time. And it was just like, because what had happened to me made me clear that on the project, once I became project director and some 23 volunteers were sent in to Laurel, Mississippi, I decided to, create this rule. There will be no sexual harassment on this project. And I mean, it was long before I even kind of knew what I was saying, in the sense of that this was something that other people did. But it was based on my own experience, both with that man as well as with the way my colleagues reacted when I reported him. They said, we don't have time for this. We're in a life and death struggle here. And then to suggest that I should have given him some, quote unquote, was just, that did it, So in the project, since I was project director, it was like, it will not be tolerated here. And if a woman tells you no, that is it. And if you persist and she informs me, you will have to leave the project.
Yeah, there were times that women were taking the notes, and I'm not saying there was no sexism, but I am saying that it was so much less than what you got when you got out of SNCC. And that's what I think some of the white women found. And so those two white women who did the position paper at Waveland in 1964, they will both say, and particularly I've heard Casey say, when we get into SDS, the white guys assume that we're going to get the coffee, that we should leave them alone to make the big decisions of life. And, it's the donuts and the coffee, That would have been unheard of in SNCC. As a matter of fact, if anybody had tried it to somebody like Ruby Doris, who has just done 30 days jail, no bail, guys in the field would say to me, we understand that Foreman is the executive secretary, but we know that Ruby understands us in a way and understands what we're dealing with in a way that Foreman doesn't really, And so, women, Diane Nash, was one of the leaders of the Nashville movement. So you got all of these women, in SNCC at least. Now, I'm not going to say that for the NAA. NAA was black male macho.
I don't believe we even got a celebrate.
This is United Press calling.
Uh-huh.
Is this the NAACP office?
Yes, it is.
Has the committee come back from the mayor's office yet?
Well, no, it hasn't.
I see.
Oh, yes, it has. I see they're coming in now.
Well, do you have any word?
And we don't know what has been accepted or rejected or what their reaction was yet. So the chairman hasn't come up either.
Now, look.
He just happy. Let me tell you
these
something.
are things we could get right now. Why
can't they accept this number one?
We accept the shit. We told them we want comments about all of it.
He can't denounce the claim.
Keep less things off your brains you possibly can. Because pressure to get you, nerve pressure to get you.
I think that the men are going to have to give a little more consideration.
We did too. We bring a lady along with us for secretary. When we come back, we told them that.
See, because, very honestly, and you know it, John, it's these ladies, people like Mrs. Duncan, Mrs. McNeely, Mrs. Mazik, Mrs. Jackson. These, I don't know, they didn't know about the meeting, but they are the people who are really getting the job done around here.
No, you got the wrong.
Sure, but
it's not who gets the job, it's the one who can represent you down there.
But they're some of these ladies intelligent enough.
So we don't want that. We don't be men like them. If we're a Negro and not good enough men to meet those people.
If you're going to be a man, I think you should be a man all the way. Now, okay, nobody was being arrested out on the picket line. And the ladies were the ones who fought off those dogs. Well then, I think that why you be so defensive about it. Not one. Just name me one of them whose name is on the school desegregation thing. Not one of them walked out there on the picket line. And over half of them never came. And yet when it's time to go around to the city hall, they can sit down there and make decisions. How can they make decisions when they really don't know what's going on?
What are we doing daily? Like I said before, we are organizing the community, going into different people's homes, you know, politically educating them, telling them exactly what is going on, not only here in Oakland, but in America and throughout the world. See, many black people are not aware of what is going on in America, or what is going on in South Africa, or over there in France, for instance, you know. We organize, since the black community is not a reading community, we talk to them, show them examples. In our paper, we have pictures, you know, so they can see what is going on. And then after they learn what is going on in the black community, then they can step forth and try to change themselves.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hey! Okay. Dress and cover. Your arms up there.
Well, my experience was more around accepting the leadership of women, especially the younger party members who would come in. And, you know, if I was officer of the day, then I would have to, you know, lay out what your tasks were. Before some of them may want to act on carrying out those tasks, they would want to confer with the men, you know. But then we would, you know, I'll never forget, Afeni Shakur and I used to talk a lot about this, because on every weekend, we would, chapters would come to the major cities for meetings. And so New Haven would come to New York. And we would have an opportunity to discuss these kinds of issues as women. And you knew that if you got the support from other sisters who were experiencing the whole thing, experiencing it as well, that would empower you then to return back to your chapter, and you would become more vigilant and more of an advocate for women. And like I mentioned in the interview, to inform young women who came into the party that they were not coming in as appendages of the men or their boyfriends or their lovers, but that they would seriously have to look at the fact, is this something that you believe in politically? And if it's not, then you need to reassess, you know, why are you here? Of course, you didn't want to lose those women. So, you know, the sexism was there amongst a lot of the men who used sexist relationships to bring women into the party. And on one level, that was very interesting, but women needed to know that they were not there because of that sexist or because of sex.
And I will say this, it's the first time I saw the Black Panthers with their berets, afros, blue shirts, black. I was like, I'm in trouble. I am in serious trouble here, because these are the most gorgeous black men I have ever seen, okay?
Some people said, and this was often said amongst some of the Panthers, one of the reasons I could never appreciate the Panthers, because their attitude towards women was despicable. So on the one hand, they talked about women taking up the gun and dying for the revolution. They also talked about women being the vehicles for reproducing people, and they should have babies for the revolution, that abortion was genocide. Women shouldn't even use birth control. If this sounds similar to your current audience, listen to the Republican program as it relates to women. The women should get back into the family, support their men so that they can go out and do things. We said, no, women are as equally revolutionary or have the capacity for that. And as far as housework was concerned, you can come home and do your share.
It was kind of like I was given the name of the women's liberator in the party because I always extolled the virtues of women and how important we were in the party, and I did not tolerate sexism. And the young women who were coming in, we were educating those women, not just me, but people like sisters like Erica Huggins, again, Frances Carter, the older sisters, and we were ensuring that the young women who were coming into the party were not being manipulated in a sexist way or not coming in behind a man, quote unquote. I challenged Huey Newton, and in my challenge, I was expelled for doing so.
They said that it was divisive to the movement. This struggle was divisive to the anti-racist struggle. And I want to take that struggle up because that view up because a number of young women today have told me that they are in the same position on campuses, on jobs, etc., where black men say essentially, you should not raise the question of gender relations because it weakens our movement against the struggle against racism. And our view was women who are oppressed will in many ways fight back, and it is the existence of that oppression, not the fight against it, that is the cause for disunity. It's not the struggle for freedom that creates the problem. It's the absence of freedom that creates the problem. So that's an important concept that people have to grapple with. You cannot, in the course of a struggle for a more democratic society, either create institutions or establish relations that are not democratic.
I want to just interrupt my presentation for a second and say that we cannot succumb to the notion of history that prevails in this country. And one of the reasons now I think that we're beginning to see a lot of black history is because they want that to be black history and just history, the past. Now, like the American Revolution, you know, I mean, what is the American Revolution today? You talk about revolution today, you know, I'm a communist, and I talk about revolution, and people say that, you know, I mean, that's some mad, raving maniac. But what about the American Revolution? This country was founded in revolution, but it has become history buried, dead in the past, and that's what they're trying to do with us.
The majority of women are oppressed, but how do we qualify oppressed? We weren't taking off our brassieres. We didn't particularly believe in free love. And we also believed that our struggle as a race, not as a group of women, was a bigger issue, okay? That was a bigger issue. See, because a policeman did not, because you were a Black Panther, stop kicking your ass. Or you were a black woman, stop kicking your ass. They didn't do that in Montgomery. They beat you down.
I don't know that I've ever faced discrimination as a woman as yet. And I think that's because the racial situation in America makes most black women face discrimination as black.
I don't think that the movement is as relevant to the needs of poor women and minority women as it should be, probably because the movement is mostly composed of middle-class women who are naturally concerned with the issues that affect their lives.
I mean, when we look at the history of slavery, we have a whole situation where no one cared if you were a woman or not. You had to get out into the field. Or after freedom, no one cared whether you were a woman or not. You had to work to support your family. So black women, that's one of the problems that Women's Lib has, I think, in relating to the black woman. They look at themselves as women, but we've had to look at ourselves as black.
That whole question of chauvinism has been answered many times in many ways. The white feminist movement, it was a little distance from the Black Panther Party, and it was also a little distance from a lot of other organizations because it was elitist. I mean, you're white. You comb your hair, take off your flowers, and you can go back to being Missy Susie. I can't.
Because Black Panther women came from the African American community, the issues that we face were different than the feminist movement. Now, that is not to say that the question of how women are treated in general in our society, how African American women are treated, were not very, very important, and were not important issues to the Black Panther women. But the struggle between men and women for people of African descent who were formerly slaves, whose ancestors were slaves, cannot be the same struggles as the feminist movement.
I really thought it was a diversion. I thought we got black people being killed. The Mississippi Freedom Labor Union is, there were all these things that we were trying to do on an economic level, sharecroppers being thrown off their homes for trying to register to vote, folks shooting in the houses. It's like, is this really something that I want to deal with? Not really.
White women who were feminists were racist, generally speaking, certainly not all of them, but the women's movement was generally racist. That they, first of all, they didn't understand the issues and the concerns of Black women. In the National Black Feminist Organization, we had a committee for household technicians, because we understood that women who cleaned houses for a living were entrepreneurs in many cases and really deserved respect and pay. And that if you did work like that, you might not have health insurance. And we were concerned about that. Some of the white feminists weren't necessarily concerned about the kinds of issues that would affect Black women.
Then there was a woman named Carolyn Reed, and her issue was household workers. And she had an organization, and it was called something Household Technicians. And she made us aware of the conditions of household workers and their pay, their lack of holidays, blah, blah, blah. These were things that were significant to Black women. It wasn't on the agenda of the white women's movement. They were the ones who were employing us.
Often the people who don't want to see women go outside the home to work will bring up the argument, well, a woman doesn't need to do it. It's a second salary in the family, or she doesn't need to. She's just on a lark. How do you react to that? Do you need to work?
Yeah, I need to work.
Why do you need to work?
I need to work, well, because for one thing, my husband and I separated, and I have 4 children.
Are you the sole support of the children?
Yes, and I do.
That's a pretty strong need.
And I do have to work. Yes, and but the kids give me a lot of help. They cook, they wash clothes, they iron, they clean. and I do my share. When they were coming up, like I used to play football, baseball, ride bikes, skate even, fall down and, you know, get up. But that was the part that I had to play because my husband was there when they needed him. And it was a thing like they would say, gee, Ma, we never have anybody to play with us, or why, you know, can't you go with us? And I would go out with them. I had to be a mother and a father. And so I do have the need to work.
And you felt the need, not just economically, but also in an emotional
way. Right. I had to, you know, get out there with them.
Sherry, do you need to work?
Yeah. I tried staying at home for a while. You know, I was always playing baseball or whatever, and I just wasn't ever interested in, you know, the cooking and the sewing. Although I do those things well, that's okay, but the cleaning and, you know, I don't care who you are, I think that's a bad job.
Sheets have to be changed every day. The sheets have to be washed and cleaned and pressed and starched every day. The head supervisors around there would oppress me as an individual because I didn't know my place. And they considered my place was to go around and sweep. All non-whites is all non-professionals, like the kitchen help. That's the meals, not only for the patients, but also for the employees of the hospital.
I've been in publishing for about 5 years, and I really had to go through the coals to get anywhere. I had to do that whole secretary thing for years, and I'm still, like, I'm pretty much still there, only now I reached a point where they call me an editorial assistant, but I'm still a secretary. Have literally been days, I can remember in New York where I sat at the typewriter and just started to cry, because, like, you sit there and all of a sudden it just hits you, it comes inside you, you know, that you've been typing somebody else's stuff for so long, and, I mean, you have nothing to do with it. It's alienating labor. It's alienated.
Also, you're much more than a secretary. You have to fix the coffee, or you have to play these jokes with the men coming in, or you have to hang up their coat or something.
One of the things that I understand about Black women is our immense humanity, because we can easily get their issues. All they have to do is say 2 words. We understood the issue of Scarsdale, which is my code for miserable, rich or middle class white women who have little meaning in their lives, so that they drink as a substitute for the juiciness of life. You could say that to us one time and we got it. But I don't think, because they have been so privileged, it's really difficult to get them to understand that their whole mode of operating and being is from a position of privilege. And that is why you really want to, or at that time, we really wanted to work with each other.
There are many white women who talk about gender oppression, but who themselves then turn around and oppress other women, particularly women of color. I won't forget that Dianne Feinstein, senator of the state where I now live, was a woman who talked about gender equality, talked about women's freedom, and then come to find out one of the reasons she is able to participate in society at an equal level with men is because she had hired to take care of her domestic tasks, clean her house, look after her kids, a I don't recall, but it was a woman of color from Central America, an illegal alien that Feinstein was always screaming about. You know, so you begin to see that women who are fighting for women's liberation, some of them are prepared to compromise when it comes to certain class questions and turn around and oppress other women, which becomes the basis then for them and their ability to participate in society. We, on the other hand, looked at all the women, and particularly that's why we say you need to, when you're talking about a liberation agenda for women, it has to liberate all the women and not just the elite few women. And that's the reason why we were always very hesitant to call ourselves feminists, because we thought those women who called themselves feminists were just kind of wanted to join their brothers and on an equal basis with, say, they wanted to enter the capitalist society as it was. Whereas we said equity for us was not just entering the society as it was, but transforming the society so that it was a democratic society for women.
There's just so many of them who, they don't want to acknowledge that for many Black women who look like a certain way, we are not heard, we're not valued, and so the issue of equality for us is not even, we're not even there yet on things like man-woman treatment. We're on just being considered a woman in many women's cases. Now, some people watching this interview will say, well, she's very attractive, or will think, some may not, but I'm saying they will say, why is she complaining? She looks good. But that's not my job. My job is to speak on behalf of all Black women who I feel, when they bring up a term like Black women, that includes a wide range of women who don't have the looks or the whatever that it's accessible to be heard, to have power. And Americans often are not honest about that so much of a woman's power in America, no matter where you go, even in a feminist movement, has to do with how you look and are presented and, you know, all these different things. And I find going around the country dealing with Black women is that many times Black women are, like I just said, not even considered women by certain people who have power. So they're not looking to have you be in that panel with them. They're not looking to have a place for you, per se. They want to, a lot of people think that feeling sorry for us is justice. You know, I have a lot of women that I argue with who I'm like, no, you feel sorry for Black women and you think that's enough. You're not offering us to come into the door and actually be a competitor, and Black women should be, because we are women.
When I lived in the commune in Philadelphia, it was with white feminist women, white radical women, lesbian women. So it was always a struggle going on. Where do I fit in this? What about me? What about us? You know. So yes, of course, oftentimes we felt, as women, as Black women, we felt marginalized, because it was always the struggle to try to show that not only were we being oppressed and exploited as women, but to bring in the racial component was always important, you know. For example, the struggle around reproductive rights, we took on the struggle around sterilization, which expanded that feminist argument of reproductive rights, because we were united with Puerto Rican women in Puerto Rico, where 35% of those women had been sterilized of childbearing age, because U.S. pharmaceutical companies were going to Puerto Rico and using Puerto Rican women as guinea pigs, so that the pill could be sold on the global market, so that you had a right to choose whether you wanted to get pregnant or not. But at whose expense?
Well, there was also the question of African American infant mortality rates, which were huge because of the horrible conditions in healthcare. So we were really trying to preserve our children, because our children are dying at a much greater rate than white women who had access to decent health care. So, of course, we were not having children at the high rate that people want to make it sound like.
Reproductive rights, we control those. I mean, everybody knew where to go get a coat hanger.
We were also interested in the rights of women who had children. So when we had our meetings, we always considered the possibility that some women might not be able to come to a meeting because they had a baby. And so we wrote policy, or we did programming around that, so that women who had babies, who had children, were also supported and treated as a sister too, because we considered we were all sisters.
What about you, Joan?
Well, since my kids are teenagers, I have no problem with babysitting. But it's a good feeling when you go to work and knowing that your child is being taken care of, because before they became teenagers, I was a working mother when they were very little. And I had problems with girls who would come in and bring friends with them. And then you had to worry about that, and then worry about your child being taken care of also.
No daycare facilities.
No daycare facilities.
I guess that would be true for all three of you, that you've never had daycare. It's
No.
been a matter of fun.
Family. My mother or my grandmother would take care, but no daycare facilities for them.
Well, we've been lucky in the daycare. My little girl Heidi has been going to daycare since she was 2.5 at a great center. Just marvelous, with lots of helpful adults, loving adults, and just great care.
Women want to be productive citizens, women particularly who have to take care of their families. They don't want public assistance. They want to be able to go out and work, be able to pay their taxes so that they can be considered productive citizens. But if you don't have child care centers, you have all of these women who have to support their families going back on the public assistance rolls. Thousands of women in America are not working because of the need for additional luxuries. They're working because it's a necessity. And if we believe in our children, and we want to give our children the best, since we say we're a child-oriented society, we should develop the kind of national child care centers in this country that's desperately needed.
I got on welfare because I was pregnant. I had just got out of school and I had a job and I got pregnant. I'm not a married woman. And I didn't have an income coming in. And when I got on it, I received $47. That's after I had my baby, but which was 3 months after he was born that they gave me the 47. I was living on 50-something and paying the rent, the gas and light, the water, and the garbage. And if I got some food, I was happy. Well, now, I fed my baby from going around begging. That's what welfare means. You go around taking handouts. You're no longer a woman. You're not a human being, really. When they say poor, they mean poor.
Did they ever tell you that you couldn't have a boyfriend?
Oh, yeah, they told me all of that. But that didn't stop me from having boyfriends because they told me that. My mother told me things like that. And if I don't listen to my mother, what I'm going to listen to welfare for? And my children supporting in their ways and leathers and things like that. You know what I mean? And I'm just getting all this money. They're just giving me all this money. And I got an ice box and a refrigerator and everything, washing machines, everything. What's the truth? The truth? I haven't got nothing in my house. And barely enough, she's changed the bed. And I got to keep the fire going all night to keep my children warm. And if I want to listen to myself, I can wake my children up and listen to them holler. And as far as food, I can walk in one good bare cabinet and look at it and wish for a steak or tomatoes or something that everybody else up in the plushest places is thinking. And I haven't got a ring on either finger. And I'm not going to get one as long as I stay on welfare. So welfare, shuck you. And we know what it's all about. Because if any of these rich people ever get broke and go on welfare, I pity them. They're going to die. They're going to jump out the window.
We went into the business of the stores that were overcharging welfare clients who were buying on credit. I myself used to go into the stores, maybe buy 3 kinds of meat, and we would take them and weigh them and see how much he overcharged us. Our main reason for wanting to start a consumer buying club is so that welfare clients will not have to go back buying food on time. Because we found that when a client went and bought food for $10, when she went to pay her bill, the bill had gone up $5. So this is our main purpose of feeding these people for a whole month, so that when they got the checks on the first of the month, that they wouldn't have to go back into debt. We're trying to stop this.
Well, I say myself, I feel that everybody should be able to put in $10. This is my own stand.
Now, what do we get for this membership fee of $10?
All right. This is a membership fee in order to hold in the trade, in order to run the thing. As far as, like, paying the thing that we have to have, in order, like, truck. We got to order a truck. How are we going to get it? I mean, you know, like, we got to rent a truck or pay somebody to go get the stuff or whatever. Like, we got to have some money in order to get started.
I don't know if everybody here is on welfare when they're talking about $10 at this date in the month to give up. And I know I couldn't give it, and I think about 10 or 12 others couldn't give up $10 at this date in the month.
And how are we going to start anything if we don't have any money? If you tell me that, then I want to know after that.
You just don't have $10 to put out. I don't know how Ms. Jones does it. I wish she'd tell me.
I don't have no money like that. I will have it put it by your name that you will give your money.
There's a lot of business going on, and perhaps this is the wrong time to say what I have to say. Because what I do have to say, I'm quite sure you're not going to be pleased at it. This committee, in the past month, has raised, to my knowledge, several $1,000s to provide free food for the welfare recipients.
Wait, Mr. Harrison, we have a bank account, and all money that was given to me haven't come to not even. No.
Well,
check yourself.
Well, I won't say several $1,000s, but this committee has dedicated itself to raising funds to provide food.
I know, you come down here to congratulate us, pat us on the back, or what?
I didn't come down to congratulate you. I came down to tell you about what is needed to start a buying club and what kind of commitment is necessary to make it work.
Do you think you need more than 20 people to buy a buying club?
I think 20 people is a start.
Yes, and that's what we've done.
But it's not enough. I think if the next meeting comes along and there's not 40 people here, it's not enough.
You know, for a whole 18 months I've been struggling getting this committee together. And I didn't have nobody really, like the staff, UCC, to come and help. I mean, it's nice to come down here and tell us now what we did here in April. But what about all last year?
And I will tell you in response to that UCC is never going to do anything until the people make the demand.
No, wait a minute, Wait, now you come in and you want to talk. I got some talk for you, Dean.
Okay.
How many times have I came down to your staff meeting on Friday and on Wednesday and asked why didn't the other area boards or the people in the area boards did not come and help the welfare mothers?
April 1st, 19 people went to jail. The Welfare Mother Committee spearheaded it. Don't tell us about 300 people. We see what they did down there. Why do you think we're doing anything this month? UCC said out on Branford Place. We have a buying club and we're going to do something. They can come see us.
My baby. Don't get up and say you got to go home. This is where you speak at here. Oh, no, I mean, let him know how you feel.
Well, I thought
we've been struggling with this thing for a long time. You don't let nobody come in here and pat you on the back for 1 month what you did.
Right.
And what they did. We've been doing this all the time. I mean, don't get up and say you going home now. The man is here. Tell him that's the way you feel. Get him riled up. Right. That's the way the people talk down there when they come to their conference. I want to see you get up on the floor and let them people that they talking about their taxes are paying your bills. Yeah. Baby, I had it. I had it up to here. When they call and ask me what they taxes paying for my children.
I don't like that doggone jump. I mean, you sit there. I mean, don't jump up and run it when I'm going home now. Stay here and let this man know that you don't like what happened. Let me tell you something. All welfare mothers are not sitting down. I'm on welfare and I still work. And so that's why my taxes are paying for everything else too. Where you been? Where you been sitting up in office? How you know what we doing? You're not gonna stand up here and tell me that I've been sitting down and I got to head to the
I walked in here on 20 people and told them I have enough.
This is what happened to me.
It's not enough. It's not enough. If you go down to the mayor's office with 5 people, he's going to have his
myself and get what I want. I don't need no 5 people. If you got to have a couple hundred grand, then you want to forget it. That's all she wants. It don't take no 5. It don't take no 5. I can go to Washington and get what I want by myself. I don't need no 5 people.
Our meeting is okay, come up the damn hill and see what we're doing. What poor people can do. We're gonna do it.
I'll tell you where your man is tonight. I don't know. You have it. I have it. Man, don't throw it so hard. You should have one on the left hand side. I have one.
We came together in 1968 at a time when SNCC, as a solid organization with a unified program of struggle, was beginning to disintegrate. So there were a number of women that were attracted, particularly in New York, to the SNCC Black Women's Liberation Committee, but did not have any kind of relationship with SNCC itself. And therefore, people felt that we should actually become independent of SNCC. And we formed something called the Black Women's Alliance. And other black women came in. So at a time when at least SNCC in New York was having meetings and maybe 5 or 10 people would come, we were having meetings and 40 or 50 black women would show up, you know, to talk about some of these issues around. We had a lot of consciousness raising going on. We did a lot of anti-war work. It's no, even though we organized as women, we didn't necessarily only organize. We also worked with SNCC and other organizations that were advancing what we considered a revolutionary agenda, pro-peace agenda, anti-Vietnam War agenda, pro-working class. These are things that we had learned at SNCC from the South, you know, to the masses, not just the elite that need to have advances. And as a result of that, we ran into groups, particularly in New York, the Puerto Rican independence movement. We were approached after we had been in existence for about less than a year by women, some Puerto Rican women, who said there's nothing like this that exists in our organization. And most of them came from the Puerto Rican Independence Party.
Now, there would be some who would still argue that, you know, we got our own oppression, why are we getting involved with them? People who still argue, why are we concerned about what's going on over there when we got our own problems here? You hear that. You still hear that. And what that does, it undermines the possibility of collective strength, you know. And it in no way means that you are making it less important of who you are and the group that you represent. But it has a lot to do with how your political perspective and how you expand your worldview.
There were a few women who left the organization when we became a third world organization. They felt that the situation of black women was so unique that they couldn't really unite with some of the other women of color. We essentially took the different position. We said the unities, there were differences, yes, but the unities were more profound and lasting, and formed the basis upon which we could unite around a common program of struggle than the differences did. And certainly at the level of giving ourselves some strength in terms of advancing our agenda, the more people you have, the better it is. And so in our case, it was almost by accident, it's serendipitous, that we become a third world organization. Because it wasn't like, oh, we're sitting around theoretically thinking, oh, we should become a third world organization, you know, we shouldn't just be a black organization. No, some Puerto Rican women come and say, there is no organization for us, and we need this struggle around sexism. We feel so excluded from and so marginalized from some of our struggles. You guys have managed to form this organization, and would you consider letting us join you? And like I said, we had struggles around that. Some said no, but we eventually voted on it, and we voted that we should let the Puerto Rican women come in. And in fact, they provided us with some energy and input into some of the discussions that was very, very important in terms of our own political development.
How long is your workday?
8 hours on the assembly line, without sitting, of course. Besides getting 30 minutes for lunch, they shift us 2 or 3 times for the toilet if we ask. We get about a half hour's rest in the 8 hours.
Media hora de descanso. En las 8 horas. Claro, en las 8 horas, media hora de descanso. Aproximadamente media hora trabajamos.
We work much more than the men.
What's your work and what is the man's work here?
It's different work. The men finish the work we start. We want higher pay. Things are so expensive now, and we don't have enough to support our children, who continually ask for this and that for school. Yes, my husband works, but that's not enough.
El señor sí trabaja, pero no se da abasto. Lo primero que a mí me sorprendió fue que hubiera un número tan elevado.
What first struck me was the large number of women in Latin America working as domestic servants. For example, here in Mexico, 1 out of every 3 women who works is a maid. In Chile, approximately half the women working are maids, according to 1960 statistics. In Peru, about 2/3 of the female labor force consists of domestic servants.
Las 2/3 partes de la fuerza de trabajo femenina es sirviente.
No son buenas para tratar a las empleadas.
They treat us maids badly. We're their equals, right? So they ought to treat us well. If we start to work at 8 in the morning, the least they could do is offer us a glass of milk. They don't even give us a cup of tea.
It's such a critical time in our history and what's going on in this country politically and economically. And I think we're kind of at a real serious juncture where it is important for us to form alliances with other women of color. And the reason I say that is because there's such a backlash now against poor people who are primarily Black and Latino, and there is a severe backlash against immigrants. And what usually happens is that a way is found to divide and conquer. And my fear is that people of African descent, women and men, will separate from immigrants, and there will be opposing groups. And I think that foretells a disastrous situation, because we're in this together in terms of saving this country, really. I think it's that critical. And as people who were brought over as slaves, and all we have gone through and all we have accomplished, if we don't have the capacity to understand what today's immigrants are going through, and it's not just like Latinos, although they are here in the larger numbers, but there are people from Africa and the Caribbean and all over the world, really, who are now in the United States vying for citizenship. And we need to acknowledge each other in some fundamental, powerful way. And then there is the splitting off of Muslims and that whole classification of them versus us. I think we got to figure this out and understand that we cannot allow this to continue to happen, because it's divide and conquer all over again. And when has that ever worked to the benefit of the larger community? It doesn't.
Coming out of the party, I knew the importance of internationalism. You know, I mean, I'm steeped in it. And the alliance, the National Alliance of Third World, the National Alliance of Women, I was also a member of the National Alliance of Third World Journalists. But the women's organization answered my needs, you know, as a woman, as a woman of color, bridging this divide that existed in this country between women of color. And this was a place where we all were, you know. My first, you know, I met women, we were a part of women who were involved in the Asian movements, and like I said earlier, in the Chicano struggles, women who were Native American women. Imagine being in an organization in the 70s where all of us are together and we're demonstrating around reproductive rights. I mean, I mean, if something happened and you understand about Hiroshima, if something happened in the Chicano movement, you can mobilize Black women and other women of color to go out and stand side by side with these sisters. I mean, it just broadened my whole worldview.
The minority delegates crossed their own racial and ethnic barriers to write a new substitute motion in a unique and passionate display of unity.
Microphone 4, you are recognized.
Madam Chairperson, I am Assemblywoman Maxine Waters, delegate from the state of California. The United Minority Caucus of International Women's Year Conference 1977 moved to substitute the resolution on minority women as it is presented in the proposed plan of action. And we would like to substitute that as follows, Madam Chairperson.
Billy Masters, Delegate at Large from the state of California, Chair of the First National Indian Women's and Alaskan Natives Caucus, formed here at the IWI. American Indian and Alaskan Native women have a relationship to Earth Mother and the Great Spirit, as well as a heritage based on the sovereignty of Indian peoples. The federal government should guarantee tribal rights tribal sovereignty, honor existing treaties.
My name is Mari Coty. I am a delegate from the state of California, and I am a spokesperson for the Asian Pacific American Women's Caucus. Asian Pacific American women are wrongly thought to be part of a model minority with few problems. This obscures our vulnerability due to language and cultural barriers, sweatshop work conditions with high health hazards, the particular problems of wives of U.S. servicemen, lack of access to accreditation and licensing because of immigrant status, and to many federally funded services.
I am Sandra Serrano Sul, President of Comisión Femenil Mexicana Nacional. Deportation of mothers of American-born children must be stopped, and legislation enacted for parents to remain with their children. Citizenship provisions should be facilitated. Legislation under the National Labor Relations Act should be enacted to provide migrant farm working women the federal minimum wage rate. Collective bargaining
Please come
rights.
to order. Please come to order. Go on, please.
Collective bargaining rights, adequate housing, and bilingual, bicultural social service delivery.
Ms. King, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. On behalf of the Black women of America, I would like to read the following statement as a part of this resolution for minority women. The President and Congress should provide for full quality education, including these special admission programs, and for the full implementation and enforcement of all affirmative action programs
Please come to order.
at all levels of education. The President and the Congress should immediately address the crises of unemployment, which impacts the Black community and results in Black teenage women having the highest rate of unemployment.
The President, Congress, and all federal agencies should utilize fully in all deliberations and planning processes the Black Women's Plan of Action, which clearly reflects and delineates other major concerns of Black women. Would all of those in favor of this resolution stand?
At the time, most of my experience was with NBFO, and I did not pay that much attention to feminists in general. But I think a lot of our issues had to do with immediate survival, like economics. And when you talk about economics, you have to consider child care. Because if you don't have child care, you can't work. And some of our issues, at least for me, I can't say this is true of NBFO, but I was always interested in the personal development of individual women. What did it mean to be a woman? And I'm reluctant to say that white women didn't think about that or care about that. But for us, having been stereotyped as mammies, having been stereotyped as ignorant or sex-greedy people, that we really, and in many cases, only knew ourselves as opposite to what the media said we were, but then we really didn't know what we were because we were reacting.
I read an article in a local newspaper, and it said there was a meeting of the National Black Feminist Organization. And I thought, oh, great. What's this? Let me go. And I walked into a church basement, and I saw a room filled with young African American women, all predominantly 20s, 30s, 40s, some older. And it was at least 50 women in this room. And I thought, my God, I was so thrilled to see this room full of women who looked so interesting and so capable and had such purpose. And I thought, this is absolutely where I belong.
The civil rights movement had the force and fuel of men, women, and people of other races. The Black feminist movement was a much lonelier movement. It really was pretty much us. When the feminist movement first evolved, the newspapers were really interested in it because it was something new and different, and they could kind of be familiar with white women, and they got the notion that it was about bra burning. They certainly wanted to see that, although that never happened. But when it was the Black women, it was we were like your mothers and your aunties. We weren't necessarily experienced, we weren't media savvy, and we were infiltrated by entities that I cannot call because I'm not that sophisticated. So I don't know whether it's the CIA or the BGQ, but they would send in people to disrupt our meetings. We did not know that that was going on. I can remember one particular conference where we were talking, and this woman stood up and said, I think it was that one of our conferences on racism and sexism in the women's movement, or racism in the women's movement. And somebody stood up and said, you all aren't dealing with the concerns of lesbians. And we got into a dialogue with that one person. And rather than say, what are you talking about? Oh, please, and go back to our business, we were divided. And now we were taken off our course. In retrospect, some of those people were plants, and we didn't know anything about that. And I do believe that that is one of the prime reasons that we didn't continue. And a lot of this I don't totally remember, but some of it I do. It was a very painful ending to the National Black Feminist Organization. We were accused of things. We were accused of sending women to the store to get our cleaning. I mean, stuff that I think was just what the infiltrators do to disarm you, and I think we were disarmed by it.
So, I don't have any more.
Oh, goody. Okay, fine.
Is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
No, I will say though that what I learned in SNCC and the kind of support I got from both men and women and from local communities carried me through the rest of my life. I mean, it's not just the values, which of course my family gave me as well, but it was the values I got from SNCC and the skills that I developed. And I was able to develop those because I was really nurtured by the women, by the men as well as by the women in SNCC.
A couple of years ago, a group of former NBFO members got together to talk about some of this stuff. And there was on the table for discussion too was reactivating NBFO. And that didn't happen. And my reason for not pushing for that is because we've had our turn. And we did the best we could. And I think it's time for the next generation to take it on and create the environment, the organization, structure, goals, whatever, that you deem are necessary and work for them. Because I don't walk in your shoes. But it is so necessary as I go back to walking into that room and just seeing a room full of Black women who were capable and powerful and committed and just ready to deal with the problems that needed to be dealt with in a positive way. That was so empowering. I'll never forget it. I can see the room. I remember walking down the stairs and I remember feeling the presence of all of these women who were like me. And there's nothing that substitutes for that. So I think that any group that can recreate that kind of situation and make it grow and blossom, more power to them.
You know, for the enslaved Africans, male and female, who ran away, who got caught and whipped or killed, I'm very grateful to them because they show me that you can be right and fail. Or you could be right and not be a success. That gives me the freedom to live my life as I will. And I do have the sense that if I had not encountered National Black Feminist Organization when I did meet them in my 20s, that my life might be very, very different. That I might not live as free and juicy as I do now.
It's not too much more I want to say about myself. You know, I'm just happy I lived through it. And I wasn't scarred. I never went to jail. I never did drugs. I haven't lost any children. Knock on wood. I've been blessed, for lack of, well, no, that's the truth. I've been blessed, you know. Because I've been lucky to come out and have a decent life and have decent friends who have also survived some things. But ladies, it's your turn now. Cut the camera off.